All right. Let's see. That looks good. All right. So before I start, I don't read aloud. I think anybody who has looked me up or knows me from my past interviews that I do usually are off the whim. I've written down. See, I've already been starting to drink. I have written down questions in the past when I've done interviews, but when doing those interviews, the questions were more of roadmaps for me on how to go about asking different questions more so than these are the questions I'm going to ask. So it's kind of new for me, but I do have the policy of things that are donated to me. I will use, I will embrace, and if I like it, I will promote it. And this is one of those things from one of those people that are just awesome and have been a big supporter of my journey of becoming an online entertainer, opposed from a TV entertainer. Let's just start it off by saying again, I'm not going to probably be able to read this without messing up a few words. This will be a 1 out of 4 part thing. So this won't be the full entirety of the book. This will probably be about 50 pages, as there is about 218, 219 if you want to go through the entire book page to page. So we will be reading it. It is called Constant Gray. The cover is on the screen, but I will show it on my end. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful artwork. Looks more of like a castle or a tower within a tree, within a skeleton hand going down in the root. And like I said, Ryan Tyler, awesome, awesome, awesome supporter, gave me this book, wrote this book. So we'll start. So on the back, gods and Satan have left the battlefield. Their powerful allies left to their own devices. The earth has been divided, one half where the sun never sets, the other a landscape of darkness where demons lurk around every corner. The scale is now tipped in this ruined world. After being released from years of torture, a man learns his fate and is intertwined into something so much larger than himself. He doesn't know it yet, but he is to be the hand that will bring balance. See, like that right off the bat's badass. So what he has told me about this book, and I have not read this book, so me reading this out is going to be me reading this to everybody and with everybody. So from what it's been told, it's a post-apocalyptic sci-fi book, which is awesome. This is not, I don't think, a family-friendly book right off the 2 pages that I've read and stuff. And I mean, off the cover alone, sometimes destiny can be a real pain in the ass, is the quote on the top of the book, if you look right there. So this will be an adult stream via Twitch. YouTube, I'm sure people will be able to look that up no matter what I do. All right, so let's start it off. Sometimes destiny can be a real pain in the ass. Constant Gray by Ryan Tyler. For Ari, Emma, Lyric, and Electra, always seek to find your balance in this world. Wasn't that beautiful? Be careful when you cast out your demons that you don't throw away the best of yourself. Frederick Nasenchi? I can't say that last that last name, sorry. Let's see if we can put it up to the screen for y'all. Oh, no, it won't let me. Green screen won't allow it. You'll just have to buy the book to know. Exactly. Okay, so, drip. This is chapter 1. Drip, drip, drip. Drip, 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 drip. The candid sang in my ears. My heart and my head pulsed simultaneously with each drip. The same pattern had occurred for months. Every 2 to 3 seconds. Drip. You'd think it would have driven me crazy. Maybe it did. Fuck if I knew. I'd been tied up down in this place for months. I couldn't even recall how I got here. Even time, even time had got through or caught a glimpse of something. Drip. Back to square one again. The stench in the room reeked of putrid odor. A mix of rust, copper, and a month-old chicken someone left to sour in the fridge. I was glad they blindfolded me, or else I might have known what really made that awful smell. Ugh. I kind of was like, reading that. I imagined the rust scent came from the water that had been dripping for months, the copper possibly a pipe. And the chicken smell? It might have been chicken. Let's just say I'm optimistic. Not sure why, but hell, I tried to be. Aside from the inconsistent dripping, a door downstairs constantly opened and closed. It was inconsistent in its time, though. It wasn't mechanical. Probably people going in and out of a door or wind shifting through it. God knows I could have used some fresh air. At one point, a good breeze from the air conditioning blew through. But whoever brought me here originally must have decided to either stop paying their bill or kept it running occasionally upstairs. Upstairs. Let's see, sorry. I thought it had been months, but I couldn't recall the last time I heard another person in this room. At one point, it seemed fairly busy. People touched me all over my body. They would lift my legs, move my feet, or rotate my jaw back and forth. I wasn't sure what they wanted, really. I just did what any good prisoner would do. I took it and didn't offer any compliments. Complaints, sorry. Compliments. That's how I see it, though. The way he's talking is it's like he doesn't really care at this point. Like he's just been tortured and hasn't eaten anything. The fucking dripping sounds drive him fucking ludicrous. He constantly is talking about the dripping sound. Still, he's still like, hey man, this fucking dripping sound. I used to hear other people like me down here moaning and screaming in pain. They would all get shuffled out and removed after they'd been used up. I just always had stamina, I guess. As far as I could remember back anyways. I'm not sure what kept me going, but I imagined that I had someone out there important to me that I needed to see. Could have a dog, maybe a cat. Nah, not a cat. I was definitely a dog person. But I had an English bulldog. I bet I had an English bulldog with a squished up face. I'd have called him Rupert. I thought a lot when my mind drifted off around here. One didn't have the luxury to just get up and dance if he got bored. Here I lied, chained to a gurney, blindfolded and gagged. Ugh, damn, dude, it sounds like a sex shop, eh? It seemed rather dull. If you weren't into that sort of thing, drip, drip, drip. Hello? Came a sound from upstairs. I tried to open my eyes, but realized once again the blindfolded impeded my vision, and gag prevented me from answering them. How easily you get used to it. I sat quietly and acted like a good prisoner. Hello? I heard it again, a man's voice echoing out. Big, too, from the way his voice thundered and bounced off the walls and pipes. Not that a man's voice can be indecisive of his size. Probably a bit presumptuous on my part. I heard some loud crashing upstairs. Things were being moved around. My body prickled from the cold as I listened. There is no one here. This place must have been abandoned years ago, I heard someone say through the ceiling. Yeah, I bet we could set up in here and no one would even notice, the original voice said. That couldn't be true. I'd only been down here for a few months, right? The pipes groaned, shaking violently from lack of use over the years. The whole building seemed to shake. Plumbing works and water is flowing, a female voice shouted out. I heard more things scraping against the floor upstairs. It sounded like music to me, something I had not heard forever. I enjoyed every little strange noise. Metal grated against the concrete. Someone dragged a table across the floor. The people talked to one another. I clung to every syllable like it would be my last. Dude, this place is a gamble. There's junk everywhere and it smells like a fucking sewer, the deep voice rumbled. Shut up, Reese. This place is amazing. How many places have we been able to squat at and had water, the female voice said. She's right, just one, answered the third voice. 2 males, 1 female. How wonderful. It had been too long. So refreshing to have company after all this time. However long it had been. I forgot. The hell is that? Said a female voice. I don't know. It looks like a refrigerator, the third voice answered. No shit, Sherlock. I know it's a fucking fridge. What is it? What is that behind it? She retorted. Scraping and grunting came from up the stairs. The voices seemed to be getting louder. Whoa, the female said. Dude, this is some horror film shit, the third voice said. It's a door, Reese said. Should I open it? He asked. Hell yeah, the girl said. You were way too eager to get chopped up and eaten, Maddie, said the third one. Well, being a horror movie, they always kill the black guy first, Anthony. She laughed loudly. The door bucked and shook, and the walls quaked as well. Debris and dust fell from the ceiling and landed on my body. My guess about his size seemed to hold merit now. Reese had great strength. All the muscle in the world would not budge that door, though. It couldn't have been more than a few weeks old. I'd overheard them saying they were putting it up due to smells wafting outside the basement. The guy who cut us up complained about it often. So basically, it is like a. I mean, like how I was reading it off the first part of it, I was even saying it sounds like a sex dungeon. This guy's like a horror film sex dungeon, like Saw, or like Hostel. That's what it kind of sounds like so far. Hold on. He had a thick southern accent, so I doubt they would. Boom, 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 snap, pop, creak. The door protested loudly. Silence again. Then a fit of coughing broke out from the party upstairs. Holy shit, I think I'm going to puke, groaned Anthony. Oh, me too, Maddie said. I could hear her rush across the room upstairs. I heard footsteps thumping down the stairs. It had been months since I've heard that. In a few moments, it would be examined and cut open again. Click, click, I heard the light switch being tested. Reese said. Any axe murderers down here? Maddie chimed in. If so, tell him we got a black guy up here, she laughed again. Anthony sighed. So as long as I keep my shirt on, no one will kill me, she laughed. Then you're better off dead. You can't keep your top on, much less your legs closed, Anthony said, laughing. Fuck you, she snapped. The footsteps glided cautiously through the room. There were several breaks in the cadence of his steps. He must have stopped and examined something. His breathing slowed down. Well, what the hell is down there? Maddie yelled from the doorway upstairs. Stay upstairs, he said evenly. I felt the warmth of a body next to my left arm. This is how the process always started. He would begin by feeling my body all over. I would be thoroughly examined, and then they would decide what they wanted to take. Holy shit, Reese said right next to me. I felt the air from his voice brush against my skin. Goosebumps rippled across my skin. You're alive, he said. Who's alive? Anthony said. He thumped down the stairs. I heard him gasp. What the fuck? Let's get the fuck out of here. This is some dark arts shit, Anthony continued. Seriously, Reese, we don't want to be messing with these people or their shit, Reese, he implored. Reese's breathing never changed. She had the same steady breath the whole time. I felt a hand on my shoulder. A large beer-sized hand. Bear. Not beer. A large bear-sized hand, just as I had suspected, calloused fingered from hard life sat idle before I felt my right arm being lifted from the table. I heard the chains clank off the side of the gurney. They were chasing the things they wanted. This is what they always did. This is the process. He reached over and did the same thing to my right leg. The chains made the ringing noise off the table again. Funny, I could barely feel the weight of my own legs. The pressure of his hands are the only thing I could feel. Kind of like when you sit down on the toilet too long and your legs go numb. Toilet. I said toiler. Ha! So it's like when you're sitting on the toilet and like your legs die, kind of thing. Like your leg dies from like the under part of your thigh and your leg, kind of where your knee is on the toilet seat. In that sense, man. So far, it's this guy in this like sex dungeon thing, sitting there being cut open constantly. So he's constantly being cut open. He's constantly being examined, is how he's describing it. And it hasn't stopped as much as it's been. Like, I don't know how he would be alive. He's just like remarkable how he's alive. I felt needles as my blood flowed into my legs. Lastly, I felt his hands on my face, the tips of his fingers running along my temples and cheekbones. The same numbness throughout, slight pressure from his fingers around the back of my head. I felt his fingers wrap around the straps that held the gag in place. They submitted to Reese's strength as they snapped off. Stagnant air poured into my lungs. I breathed in deeply. The air refreshed me. I did not taste the rotten air like I thought I would have. It revealed in its sweetness, utterly... what is that? Etheric after so long. I guess it's like they said about not knowing you stunk because you were around it and got used to it. Only fresh air here. So good to salivate again. You never know how much you'll miss something until you're a prisoner of people harvesting your body parts. Are you okay? Reese asked me. Sure, boss. My vocal cords rattle and dust off after such a lack of use. My words came out more gravely than I was used to. Gravelly. More gravelly than I was used to. Sorry. How long have you been down here? He asked. Dude, are you really fucking talking to a corpse? Did he just talk? Anthony said. The fuck is going on down here? Maddie yelled. Nothing, Reese's powerful voice boomed. Stay upstairs. Reese must have turned to Anthony because his voice shifted. Get upstairs, don't tell her shit. We have to let this guy go, he said. Me? Was he going to let me go? Anthony must have gotten the message because I heard him run back upstairs. Felt huge fingers on my face. The light hit me as the mask came off. The change in pressure on my face was a welcome respite. I blinked away the spots in my vision. As my eyes adjusted, I saw Reese standing there as he looked at me. A tall, handsome kid stood in front of me, probably in his mid-20s. His scuffy blonde beard and shaggy blonde hair were covered in dust. His pillared blue eyes with deep blue ridges throughout them, like you were drop off a rock into water. When you drop a rock off into water, bleh, opened wide into what I anticipated as curiosity. I felt the blood flowing through my body again, like small spiders running up and down my arms and legs, every foot making its pressure felt. My muscles slowly worked themselves back to life. I flexed my hands and felt each nerve still intact. Am I free to go now? Have I met all your needs you require? I asked Reese. His brow creased in confusion. He shook his head sideways. Look, just lie there and I'll try to find a key or a hammer or something. I lied there and closed my eyes and listened to where he went. There's a desk in the corner to your left. It has 5 drawers, I said to him. Okay, I see it, he said. Open the top drawer. Clang, clang, the drawer was locked. Hit it with your right hand on top near the right side of the drawer, I told him. Pop, I heard the lock disengage. Try now, I said. I heard the drawer slide open. Whoa, that's some memory you have, he said. Check the third drawer. There's a false panel that the keys are hidden in. The drawer creaked like it always did. I heard him fumbling around the drawer until it popped. Then the sound of keys jingling. Which one? He asked. Run your fingers over them, I said. He ran his finger over the keys. The key I needed had a tiny sound to it. Not the heavy thunk of a cheap metal, but the light sound of silver. Though I doubted they had a silver key. His finger made purchase with the key. I opened my eyes. That one, I said. He grabbed it, thought it was over. No, not thought it was over. Brought it over. So, he grabbed it, brought it over. I don't know how you did that, but color me fucking impressed, he rumbled. He went from arm to arm, and then he went from leg to leg with the keys, deftly unlocking each one. My muscle had all their flow back now. I sat up and looked around the room that had been my prison. The walls were covered in oculus markings, pentagrams, blood, possibly shit. Pools of gore and the other dry liquids lay glued on the floor. Large white coolers sat all around the room along each wall. Wasn't sure of the contents, but I imagined an organic material. Seemed like somewhere they might have put our parts to keep them preserved. So are you okay? I mean, you look healthy enough, Reese said, eyeing me over. I sat nude on the gurney, my legs hanging off the edge. I looked at my body. I did, in fact, look healthy. My skin was soft with dimpled red marks from where the chains had barred my escape. My black hair hung to my shoulders at this point. I hated it this long. This beard had foregone my normal limits for it as well. Still tan after all this time in the basement, too. My muscles were in good shape, too. I flexed and felt strength within my stagnant body. I should have been emaciated. Is that what it is? Emaciated? See, like I said prior to reading this, there's probably going to be a couple words I fuck up on. Couldn't remember the last time I had actually eaten or had anything to drink for that matter. Could have been more than a month, though. I always heard people could not live a lot long without water. I do remember being cut open and having parts removed, yet I didn't see anything missing, not a single scar on my body. I had all 10 fingers, all 10 toes. Had I dreamt all those surgeries? Fuck if I knew. This is not exactly a normal standard for anybody. I looked up at Reese, remembering his question. Was I okay? I guess so, I said. Thanks for letting me go. And leaned to my left. A stainless steel tray sat next to the gurney. A good choice for a medical tray. Easy to clean, I bet. Picked it up, whipped Reese in the neck as hard as I could. He never saw it coming. Satisfying crack echoed. Damn, dude, he hit the guy who saved him. Echoed off the walls. His body dropped limp to the floor. Leaned down to his body and undressed him. Calmly put his clothes on. His frame was much broader than mine, so the clothes hung loosely all over me. It was all right, though. I hated being nude. Anthony ran downstairs to the noise. Reese probably should have listened to him. What the fuck, man? Anthony rushed down and looked at me, standing over his dead friend's clothing, eyes wide and his jaw agape. I guess in the horror movies, the big guy dies first, I asked him with a shrug. Fuck you, man. He reached into his star-covered backpack. I stood and watched him pull out a gun. Not a model I knew. Something simple, though, a revolver. They were all the same, though, clunky and unreliable. He cocked the hammer back, and I listened intensely. It's empty, I said to him. His eyes grew wider. Sweat dripped down his temple. How the hell did you know that? I charged at him with the tray and hit him in the leg. His shin splintered neatly, not nearly. Damn, so he fucking... He killed Anthony! And Reese. He's gonna. Well, he killed Reese, but he just fucked Anthony up. What about the chick upstairs? Just like is just chilling. Mm. Damn. So I charged at him with the tray and it hit him in the leg. His shin splintered neatly. A large gun fell to the ground and split the tile. Anthony looked up at me, defeat in his eyes. Come on, man. He was just trying to. His skull caved in under the weight of the tray. Just one sharp blow. His head lolled to the one side as he toppled over. I watched him slurp over and stop breathing before I strolled over to where his gun fell on the ground and took it. Leaning down to his body, seeing at he was so small, I checked his pockets because the clothes were no good to me. His wallet contained $3 bills, no ID, no Smith's card, nothing. I took the wallet, shoved it in my back pocket. Glancing up the stairs, I saw cigarette smoke wafting down. It smelled amazing. I must have had a kick with cigarettes in the past that I couldn't recall. My mouth watered for a smoke. The beeping outside. I walked upstairs into the empty, dust-covered kitchen. A thick coating of filth covered the walls, and mold crept through the cracks in the grout of the countertop tile. The floor was covered with grease, and a filthy white refrigerator lay on its side. It looked like the place had been abandoned for years, much less a few months. No sign of any kind of traffic here. The grease on the floor lay thick aside from the few smudges where the kids stomped through it. The scent of cigarette smoke urged me onward. Maddie? I asked out loud. Someone shuffled quickly into the other room. I turned my attention, snuck up to the opening. There were some swinging doors that clung desperately to their hinges. I pushed them and watched as they creaked and careened into one another. With loud whacks. I smiled widely. There's one mystery solved. They were doors to the kitchen, where the waiters and the staff had undoubtedly passed back and forth through them. I had spent my time locked away in what used to be a restaurant. Just some forgotten shithole for pass-by to seek respite with him. So it wasn't a dungeon. It was the basement of a restaurant. I swung the dilapidated doors open and saw the neglected dining room. Tables and chairs littered the floors, many laying on their sides. A few green pleather booths sat covered in dust and dirt. The front window read something backwards, words that had faded long ago. Simple place with meager decorations, paintings of plains and fields littered the walls. Cowboy stuff mostly, and a clock that had stopped working reset on the wall. It read 1:43. Well, I know that even a broke clock is right at least twice a day. Or so the cliche went. I never heard that one before. That's a good one. A young woman rocking a freshly shaved head lounged at me of the remaining booth smoking a cigarette. She looked up. Head lounged in one of the... Okay. A young woman rocking a freshly shaved head lounged in one of the remaining booths, smoking a cigarette. She looked up and saw me. Her piercing emerald green eyes met before. I took in her ruby lips. I could see from the prints left on her cigarette she was wearing thick lipstick. So? She asked in a rasp voice. Smoke escaped slowly from her mouth and nose. Who the fuck are you supposed to be? Reese, I said. I mentioned to my new clothes, may I have a cigarette? Eyeing me up and down cautiously, she opened her pack of reds and pulled out a long cigarette. Her earrings glinted from the sun as she turned her head. You going to kill me too? She raised her eyebrows. She handed me the cigarette. I took one from her hand and put it between my lips. Even unlit, it tasted fantastic. She lit the tip for me. The butane lighter. Fuck, I hated the smell of butane. Gave me a headache. I winced. She nodded in agreement as she took in the look on my face. I hate the smell too. She waved the lighter in her hand. Gives me a headache, but it's far more reliable than matches. Half of my face curled up into a half smile, and I sat down on the other side of the booth. A cloud of dust wafted skyward as I did this. I swept aside some of the dust and rubbled covering the bench. It clattered lightly on the floor. It didn't feel like I had been a prisoner for months or years. I felt fresh, like I'd just woken up from a good nap. Not one of these naps that went for too long that left you feeling like shit. But a nice half-hour nap that fixed you right up again. It seemed surreal. Could still be dreaming right now, but the cigarette tasted too damn good. And far too satisfying for me to believe that. After she inhaled deeply, Maddie spoke again. Why did you kill them? She pointed towards the kitchen with her lipstick-covered cigarette. Smoke poured from her nostrils. They were more than what they seemed. I lifted my shoulders in dismissive shrugs. She tilted her head sideways to me. What do you mean? Like they were creepers or something? She thumped her cigarette to knock ash off onto the floor. Thought about this for a second. No, not creepers. Their souls emanated a black circle. Several, in fact. This means they committed awful sins. She cocked her eyebrows at me again. That's fucked. Are you some kind of priest? She asked after taking another drag on the cigarette. The cherry on her cigarette lit up her face. Lit her face up brightly in the dark room. The bridge of her nose had light freckles scattered across it. No, I just act on instinct. Auras hide no secrets. And being able to judge someone from seeing their aura, she mentioned, quotation marks with her fingers. What does mine have? I looked at her and studied her aura briefly. It's orange. Means you have good within, I said. I thumped ash onto the table. Ha! She snorted. Fuck me, that's great. Guess those people I've killed will feel better now that I have a fucking orange aura. She sniffled and rubbed the heel of her right hand over her scalp. I took a long drag on my cigarette. The smoke burned my lungs, but gave me a release I imagined I hadn't had in years. This place was quiet, except for Maddie and I. I could only hear the strong winds blowing outside. Just mean you killed the right people, I said with the upward glance at her. Put the rest of my cigarette out on the table and got up from my seat. I looked at Maddie as I knocked the dust from my newly acquired shorts. Keep the faith, I said to her. She laughed and tossed me the rest of her cigarettes. You clearly need these more than me. Be seeing you around, she snickered. Damn, dude. Shit's getting crazy. One last thing, I said. Shoot, she leaned back against the booth and put her cigarette out on the tabletop. What's the date today? She pulled out something from her small purse. It looked like a calendar. She flipped a few pages. October 2nd, 2029. She looked up at me. I don't know when you got captured, but I did know I had been here for years now, not months. Blah, I just said that all wrong. Time to take a sip. Thank you for the follow. Drinking and reading. I don't know when I got captured, but I did know it had been here for years, not months. Messed up on that last part of that chapter. Okay, so that's the end of the chapter 1. Trip. So, yeah, to recap on that, he literally thought he was in there for, in a bottom of a torture dungeon, basically. Thought he was being cut open, had no scars. So, was he cut open? I don't know. And then he's coming out reading people's auras. And like right off the bat, saw those guys, saw they had a bad aura, and killed them. Like, killed them. Maddie doesn't have a bad aura, and she says, be seeing you around. So I'm wondering if, Maddie's going to probably show back up. And they gave these other guys names. I don't know if that's going to, come into play after that, too, in the long run. Maybe they had families. Maybe there's more to it. I don't know. And the other thing is, does he know what the fuck's going on? Like, they haven't explained anything about, like, an apocalyptic situation yet. All right. So, Chapter 2, The New World. The light blinded me, stark white, like turning on a television in a pitch black room. I couldn't blink away the blind spots in my eyes. The wind blew fiercely. It kicked dust into the lining of my clothing, making me uncomfortable immediately. I turned and observed the surroundings and saw that everything stood sun-bleached. Street and store signs that it may have been once said something clearly were faded with remnants of color from the past. The buildings themselves were mostly wreckage, scattered remains from buildings tumbled aimlessly, glass from shattered windows that might have littered the ground had long since blown away. The few buildings around the area hummed various melodies from the wind that blew through their empty windows. I took a deep breath and held it in for a beat. The air smelled clear, with a slight hint of sulfur to it. Ooh, sulfur. Sulfur's usually to demons. If we're talking about like demon shit, sulfur is the way to go. That's what's happening. That's what I think is going to be fucking happening, at least. They talk about demons on the thing. Okay, I'll stop. An odd odor for sure, like the smell of fireworks. Typically, a smell of bad omens. Heard the door behind me slam loudly and saw Maddie standing there with tattered crimson scarf whipping over her face, her short upturned nose and high cheekbones hidden. Thick black glasses covered the rest of her pretty face. I got the feeling she was staring at me behind those lenses, questioning my intentions. So, you got somewhere in mind? She asked me as she strode over. I pondered this as I looked at her. I turned back at the torrid landscape in front of me. I'm going this way. I pointed to the west where several street signs bucked wildly in the wind. Looks like a freeway. Why? She asked plainly. Instincts, I said. Well, I think that's righteous and all, but I'd suggest the opposite direction, since that way... I had already set off before she could finish her sentence. I walked for almost a mile. The wind ripped at my skin, forcing my oversized clothing to slap back and forth. I would have to replace these clothes soon. They were a nuisance. I wasn't a surfer. I was a... What was I? Who was I? I stood still for a second, stared into the glaring sun. The gigantic orb stood solid white and didn't seem to have budged since I first stepped outside the diner. While I stared up at the sun, I heard the crunch of boots in the sand. Turning, I spotted a man who was 6 foot tall and comparable size a few yards away. He stood draped in black leather. The movie Mad Max flashed through my mind. He wore goggles, a black mask, and a cliché black leather jacket, buttoned up the front with some makeshift spiked shoulders. The spiked club on his hip swayed back and forth in the wind. He stared intently at me. I needed to expedite the process here. I still had a lot to catch up on. Do you plan on staring at me all day, or do you actually have something vital to tell me? I asked him pointedly. He simply turned his left shoulder to show me the red sigil of a horned skull with the eye in its open mouth. He pointed at it with his thumb, and monitored me as if I was going to have the slightest fucking clue as what what it could be. It looked like a band patch. "Oh, you like metal?" I nodded. "Good stuff." I raised my eyebrows and monitored with a single hand thumb up and a grin. Man, that's some fucking cocky shit. He reached to his waist and grabbed his club with his right hand. What the fuck? He didn't have horrible aura, even though it did have a few stains on it. Murder and abuse. I'd seen much worse earlier on Reese and Anthony. This dude's stains were old and partially faded. See, recent sins were bold black things, pitched in color, often blotting out most of the aura. Oh well. None of this was going to matter in a few seconds. "I guess this works out. I do like your leather," I said as he walked towards me with a makeshift cudgel. Cudgel. Is that what it is? Makeshift cudgel? There's a moment of zen that I loved about fighting. Right before everything began, the anticipation was thrilling, and I knew I would feel great after this. I didn't know how I would fare at this point, since I had been locked away for some years now. I was going to soak it up, though. I watched him stood still until every last moment possible. He jogged up to me with squinted eyes and a sneer. The club gripped in his gloved hands. They were covered in dust as well worn, with several cracks in them right around the knuckles. The club looked like the end of a pool cue with the nails driven into it. A strange device for aggression. But it's possible there isn't much else for him to use at this point. His jog turned into a full sprint. Dust plumbed high behind him as he ran. He reared his club overhead. It left his stance wide open. I wanted to test my muscles, though, so I let him inside my guard. He swung downward with the club. I leaned back and he overextended to my left. He cursed and tried to connect a hit with the side of my head. A brain-splattering death blow if he landed it. Well, he leaned back for the attack. He left his ribs vulnerable. I planted my right knee into them and placed my hands on his back for added leverage. The crushing blow from my right knee to his ribs sent tremors through my fingertips. Cracking bones told me I still had it after all this time. I stepped back as he dropped to the ground, the club still gripped tightly in his hand. I stood back and stared down at him, eyeing his slow movements. I enjoyed the sound of his juddered breathing. I imagined his now punctured lung fighting desperately for air. He stood and clung to his ribs with his left arm while he grasped the club in his right. Leaning in, he clumsily lunged at me. No one could question his tenacity at this point, nor his stupidity. This time he moved slower and far less steady than before. A simple maneuver to step inside, and his elbow caught me on the shoulder. I planted my right foot and shifted my body up into the hit. His elbow snapped, hyperextending on my shoulder. The impact stung for a certain, but a fair trade for the damage I dealt to him. He reeled as he finally dropped his club. I watched him fumble with his jacket as he backed away from me. With his left hand, he produced a small gun from his jacket pocket, a fat-barreled, candy-appled red revolver. Thought he might try to burn a hole in my throat. Instead, he pointed it upwards and fired it off. It made a whooshing noise, and a trail of light followed it skyward. It was a flare gun. Calling for backup, I surmised. You have got to get the fuck out of here, I heard over a roar of the gun in the wind. Glanced over my shoulder and saw Maddie kicking up the sand as she ran my way. The man turned, began to run. "Oh, no, you don't." I snatched his club out of the sand and hurled it at his back legs. End over in the end. The air it went. It smacked him in the back of the leg, right between his thigh and his calf. His knee buckled and he toppled forward into the dirt. I charged forward and leapt onto his back. My knee crushed deep into the nape of his neck. He stopped moving overall. Just like with Reese, it began removing his leather clothing. What I wouldn't do for a clothing store, it would make getting an outfit so much easier. Maddie caught up with me at this point. "Look, man, the damn shabs are going to be coming soon." I didn't turn to her as I continued getting my opponent undressed. Opponent undressed. "No idea what that is. I cannot fear what I do not know." I removed the remaining clothes from the downed leather-clad combatant. Ugh. God. It's like the third dude's killed now. I removed the remaining clothes from the downed leather-clad combatant. Donned the clothing over the top of Reese's clothing. Why didn't you just take the other clothing off though? At that point, like, I wonder if like both sizes are about the same or something. Like, is that why he kept it on? You know, or is it just at this point he's just trying to layer up just in case? You know, I don't know. The jacket wouldn't button up properly. I had a larger chest than this guy did, so I left the bright yellow shirt showing through the open chest. Oh well. Next, I wiggled the burnished metal-framed goggles from his face and planted them on my dust-covered face. They were a welcoming thing, sort of. The pressure reminded me a bit of the blindfold I wore for years. The whole outfit change took just shy of 2 minutes. Not bad. One problem. The clothing fit well, but it was saturated with sweat. Gross. I would deal with it in lieu of the sun, though. The musty odor would pass as well. It sure as hell's beat running around in the light clothing I had just removed. Oh, so he did remove it. Okay. So he removed the clothes. He didn't keep Reese's clothes. So the clothes he stole from Reese, he killed Reese, took Reese's clothes, took that clothes off. So that whole thing that I just thought right there totally just solved that for me in a matter of seconds. Oh well, my black hair whipped across my face as the wind pickled up speed. Why am I saying pickled and ickled and ickled? I was pretty sure I hated my hair long. I wonder if I could find a barber somewhere. Yeah, right. The goggles at least held some of it back. Look, man, you got the clothes and his gear. Can we bolt? They have guns and shit. Not your typical group. Foul is a maniac. Fuel. Foul? Is it foul or fuel? Fall? Probably think it looks like a fall. F-A-U-L. Like fall is a maniac. She rasped with terror in her eyes. She ranted, and I continued to not know what the hell she rambled on about. Then something occurred to me. You're a bit of a coward, aren't you? Shit. This guy gives two fucks. He's like, oh, you saved me? Fuck you. Oh, you want to know what happened? Fuck you. The chick with the cigarettes? Ah, you're a good chick. Thanks for the cigarettes. but you're a fucking coward and you're a dumbass. Just saying. One. Man, it's fucking hilarious. I'm a survivor, you idiot. She threw her arms outwardly. She's like this. Like, fuck, what the fuck? Like, fucking talking shit. I'm only here to watch your dumb ass. I don't need your help. I'm fully capable of handling myself. Told this to the prone body on the ground. Says the guy who just got rescued from a gurney. She laughed nervously. She had me there. Fair point, I said. Thanks for that, I added as I turned to look at her. Can we just leave? She implored. I strapped the boots on my feet. They were just the right size. That's luck for you. At 6 feet tall with the size 15 shoes, I had huge feet for my height. I didn't happen to be wearing socks, though. The no socks thing was awful. Felt like the boot full of soggy sandpaper. I would have to remedy this later, though. Engines rumbled in the distance. Probably on their way to eat us or something unpleasant like that. I leaned over and grabbed the flare gun from the ground. You never know when something like this can come in handy. We left the man cooking in the sun. As we hurried along the tattered terrain, Maddie insisted on ceaselessly rambling. Ugh. So look, here's the deal. There are like 13 gods. She monitored with her fingers. Motioned with her fingers. Maddie spoke with her hands like an old televangelist might have. What? I can't even. Televangelist? I don't know. Everything was very grandiose with her. You could have watched her with the sound turned off and still made out with what she said. Because she's just so describing with her hands. Like people who talk with their hands a lot, but she's like very fucking good with it, obviously. Because if you could with no sound, like with no speaking or anything like that, it's like she'd be fucking badass for fucking charades, yeah? They're all supposed to represent some old gods or some shit. I think the whole thing is stupid, religion in general, you know? Don't get me wrong. The whole reason this planet is torn to two is because of she carried on talking as we walked along the roadway. The path appeared long, neglected, potholes hid in the sand, just waiting to snap your ankle from a misstep. The metal barriers that lined the road were long removed, possibly to become shelter from the weather. The few signs that littered this path were in relatively good shape. They gave us a way to follow. If they survived this area, we probably could too. The dust whipped around in spirals. Kind of funny how life echoed that sentiment. Shit would get kicked up and settled after a bit, only to be stepped on by the next disturbance, starting the cycle anew. Blech. Never perfect, things always changed. I strove for normality. That happy center that most people could never achieve for the mere fact they didn't think it existed. They either believed in a right way, or a wrong way were the only options. They were on either side of the fence. I like to sit in the middle and live my life my way. Shit, me too. Whoever treaded into the waters disturbed the stillness regardless of input or side. If I got out of balance, I would change the world until it met me in the middle. Maddie still rambled with some story about something. I watched her fling her hands about randomly as she spoke. That's why the Shabs run this area, and the other gangs live in the dark. Access to gas and electricity is only for the rich. Those assholes and their revolutions. Who believed there could be a happy ending to the damned apocalypse? Humans were nothing but ants under the feet of giants. No one spoke for us. They just end up left. Fucking angels and demons, man, she rattled on aimlessly. I gazed upward at the wide expanse. What time does the sun go down? I asked as I squinted at the sky. Maddie stopped and furrowed her lungs and eyebrows at me. You effing serious? What the hell am I over here talking about? No idea. I thought you were just needing to vent. I shrugged as I walked past her. Shit, fucking hell, man. I know someone that's like that, biddies. No. Christ on a bicycle. She placed her hand over her face and followed after me. The sun doesn't go down, not on this side of the earth anyway. There are 12,000 miles of light and 12,000 miles of dark. She rolled her eyes. I did say that already. I sniffled and blew some sand out of my nose. Why? She bit her lip and pinched the bridge of her nose, visibly annoyed. There was a war. God turned the sun white after the devil turned the world black. She shrugged. Gave him an edge or something. And all this happened when? I asked as some paper blew by us. I watched as it spiraled away in the direction we left. We had covered some decent ground, but the sulfur smell stayed right with us. The last 20 years or so. Do I have to repeat myself? She shook her hands in front of me. No, I just missed a lot. I'll catch up, I said, non-melancholingly. Is that what you say? Nonchalantly? I can't even say that correctly. And nodded my head. She rolled her eyes again. Perhaps it was a tic. We continued along the path in front of us. So that's the end of chapter 2. So really quickly, have a drink of my drink really quick and sit here for 1 second, and we'll do a small recap now. So, chapter 1, kills Reese, kills Anthony. 2 out of 3 of his saviors he kills. Reasoning is because he could see and read people's auras. So, he's not considering himself like a priest. He's more saying, I could read your aura. I know what it means. He's not really like explaining like, hey, I know this is what's going on with the auras. He's not really like, full on telling you how it is with that. So that's pretty much, I don't know if that's gonna come up. He's gonna find out. Memory comes back to him. He thought he was only in that prison thing on the gurney for a couple years, and now he's finding out it's like 20 years or so. So he's down there for a couple decades. And there was a war between, good and evil, heaven and hell. And at that point, that kind of opens up like a world of shit that could happen. And then they're finding out there's a gang. And now is the gang gonna be the gang that like takes care of the rich? Because she's saying, the rich control, electricity, water, gas, is that gang going to be, like a rebellion? Is it going to be a gang that kind of like helps the rich with protection and, in exchange for them having the same thing, kind of like a Hell's Angels situation, if you must. Looks like Maddie's in it for the long haul right now, But yeah, the whole concept, like, why is the sun white? Why the devil turned the sun white because the God turned the sun white because the devil turned the earth black and dark. So that's pretty tripped out. It's pretty tripped out. All right. Chapter 3, Abyssum. The day dragged on endlessly, and the shafts seemed to lag behind us for a few hours. The engines only heard sporadically in the distance. Someone once told me that making a serpentine gateway could be an ideal way to lose someone. Getaway. Ugh. So, serpentine getaway. So we tried it out. And winding our way through the sparse buildings and landscape, we entered a decrepit suburb. The houses were intermediately laid out. There could have been water treatment plant here as well, because it had ammonia smell that lingered in the air that coupled with the sulfur, made my head ache. Damn. He should be happy he's off the gurney, though. He should be happy is at least, getting air off the gurney, kind of figuring out some answers on what's going on. He should be a little happy. The headache thing sucks ass, though. But that might be a side effect to him being able to see auras and everything, is how I'm seeing that. Like sulfur and everything, I could see that kind of like giving someone a headache. But I'm wondering if it's like a headache on the lines of like, something was done to him. Because remember, when he not woke up, but when he got like the mask and gag out and everything, he looked around. And everything's like pentagrams and shit. Everything all over the place. We're just gonna have to find out, I guess, right? Hey, thank you for the follow, people. Some of the homes in the area still had roofs on them. We weaved our way through other people's lost lives. Pictures hung on the walls of family fun. Some remained in good shape. Even with this blistering sun, nothing valuable remained in any of the homes, however. They appear to have been picked clean long ago, more than likely from the very people who followed us. We crawled around and through the sparse cover. Whatever became available to hide us worked out well. We made this effort for a few hours. It must have worked. The sound of engines now absent. They seem to have stopped following us now, as well as I could remember. I had always been more than capable at fighting, but that was no reason to saddle up against a truckload of leather-clad, modern-day barbarians with guns and pointy sticks. The odds were not in our favor. I felt that they would be pissed that they lost a guy, but they would be more likely get a laugh at his stupidity from losing to some dude in a yellow shirt and board shorts. In all honesty, the man had the scrap with was still alive, at least when I left him he was. I made sure to only fracture a single cervical vertebrae. I would guess the third or fourth. He would still be able to breathe, but wouldn't be running any marathons anytime soon. Maddie stared at me with her thick eyebrows creased judgingly. I could tell her patience was dwindling as she chewed her nails again. This was an unattractive trait. Not that my opinion of her mattered. Compared to the current state of things, I'm sure she could be very fetching to those looking. We were surrounded by a plethora of dirt, pothole-laden roads, and gangs named after ominous beings to look forward to. So ultimately, she seemed pretty spectacular. She cocked an eyebrow when she noticed my staring. "The hell are you gawking at? You're not my type," she said, looking up at me in her green eyes. I shrugged. "I was just noticing that you picked at yourself a lot. You have a lot of tics." She spat something out of her mouth onto the floor. "Like the nail chewing?" she asked, pulling her thumb from her mouth. A small bit spit strung from her lip to her nail for a second. Since I drool, like, ugh. I nodded. "It's a nasty habit that I've had since I was little." She wiped her thumb on her sweatshirt. "When you're on your own mother killed by a rabid Okay, hold on. When you see your own mother killed by a rabidine and you tend to develop some tics," she said, like a scolded child. "I'm sure," I said in a pathetic attempt to confront her. She trudged forward in a bright white heat. I observed her while she walked. She had no sleeves and wore shorts. I wondered if she wandered out here all the time, why she didn't cover herself up to protect from the sun. Again, she caught my look. Her cherry lips parted in a sigh. "I know what you're thinking. but I'll take breathable clothes over suffocation. That shit you're wearing is just going to get old fast. Plus, that patch is a big, fat, blinking beacon to the gangs. She pointed at my shoulder. I stopped for a moment and ripped the patch off. Looking at it again, the horn resembled a human. The horn skull resembled a human, but much more macabre. The grin twisted upward at the corners, giving it an evil appearance. Kind of like if you let Tim Burton decide the angles. Oh, man. Fucking shout out to Tim Burton on that one, eh? Mm. The eye that hung from its mouth dripped blood from the bottom. The type of symbol natives used to ward off any passersby. Passersby. So it's like a Native American symbol to ward off evil, is what I'm guessing. I tried in true tactic. To me, though, it just looked like a sad sign of someone who had lost their way in life and turned to a bad group to fit in or to survive. They should all consider death if they couldn't find their true peace. I spun the patch into the wind. It whipped into a vortex and definitely disappeared into the horizon. That building is where I want to go. I pointed out the structure into the distance. It leaned awkwardly to the right, like a shard of glass that landed point down to the ground. The surrounded area. Drinking so much and reading, my eyesight's going. Ugh. Like a shard of glass that landed point down into the ground. The surrounding area looked like a ghetto of sorts, a makeshift wall surrounding it. Most likely made of aluminum. The wave pattern on the wall gave off an odd reflections in the endless barrage of white light. I shaded my eyes with my hand. That place is Abyssum, she pointed. I suppose it's good as any right now. Hope they have socks, I said, as my feet throbbed. She smirked and walked onwards. The glass building gleamed in the sunlight, another irritant to me. I couldn't stand this white light. Much less stomach the constant reflections. It reminded me of the asshole who invented the paisley pattern. Who approved of that moronic venture? You couldn't glance at it without getting partially blinded. Coming upon the Abyssum, the world around us fell into a hushed silence. The wind, our only companion here, vibrated off the aluminum wall. It hummed loudly as we stood there. I noticed large steel stakes erected from the ground. Each one had a chain attached that rattled in the wind. The pock-marked sand showed many scorch marks. The sand itself had turned into glass bases. I momentarily pictured some poor soul who stood there, being burned to death from some unknown source above. The ashes just blown away in the wind and forgotten. My daydream halted as a loud voice boomed out from seemingly everywhere at once. Who are you? What movie is that? What movie does that remind me of? Wizard of Oz. Who are you? Who are you? I am the great Wizard of Oz. That's what it seems like to me. Very, like someone trying to seem very dominant, bigger than they are, maybe. Why do I feel more compelled to drink as I read? Like I should probably sit down, stop drinking a little bit here. because we're halfway through, and it's getting a little nuts. I'm already slurring. The voice asked, punctuating each word. Just let us in, you muck. Maddie yelled back, with her hands cupped around her mouth. I looked on, intrigued as well as entertained by her comical reaction. This must have ruffled someone's feathers, because the voice became much louder and far more authoritative than before. If you want in, you must answer the question. Maddie threw he head back and groaned loudly. Oh, right there. Someone forgot an R. I think I forgot. Maddie threw he head back and groaned loudly. This was placed here to fuck with me, I feel like. Intentionally. This fucking guy, she muttered under her breath. I watched as she launched into the truly hilarious display. I am, she motioned with a wide gestures for dramatic effect. Maddie, she said, panting with effort. Silence. And who is he? The voice asked in its original volume. She gestured to me and answered by waving her hands around to the center of the wall. I looked at her apprehensively. I can't say the word, and I know it. Apprehensively. Like apprehensive. I can't say the fucking word. I know the word. I'm not even reading it, and I know the word. Apprehensively. Apprehensive. Ah! Apprehensively. Oh, man. I looked at her apprehensively. Okay, we're skipping past that. You guys know what I said. Reese, I lied. You are not Reese, the voice boomed. Is this really necessary? I placed my hands on my hips. Yes, none may enter who are the unaware. Then it came to me. I knew my real name. I don't know how or why it had came to me. Fate decided to let me in on a little secret. I didn't learn it where I had been, what I had done, or how I came to be in this current spot, but I did suddenly know my name. I am Kadim Gray. I placed my hand on my chest. The very ground shook where we stood. I kept my footing while Maddie fell onto her backside. You think she might have been prepared for this, seeing as she is the one who had been here before. The line formed a square around us. We were on the lift of sorts. Sand poured through the opening lines, down into the abyss below. A loud clank sounded as the world fell from underneath us. The light of the world shrank as the vast square dwindled into the small window of light above us. The smell changed from dry air with sulfur tinge to bevy of scents, cooked meat, clove, sweat, and beer. Quite a transition from above. Maddie struggled to her feet again. The platform wielded downward, and the world blurred as the platform spun around. There were no handholds or rails to grab onto as we rotated rapidly. Maddie gave up standing and sat down and held on the best she could as we descended below. Colorful lights flashed in all directions. Vertigo set in, leaving me disoriented. Suddenly, a jarring thud on the bottom of the platform had me reeling forward. The spinning slowed and eventually came to a halt. I placed my hands on my knees and tried to stave off the nausea. The room snapped shut above us with a click. The platform had stopped, but my head remained foggy on determining the whereabouts of up and down. I heard Maddie vomit. The remains of her stomach splattered across the gunmetal platform. The sand previously there blew off in our descent, only to be replaced by water and the sticky smell of bile. You okay? I put my hand on her back. She belched loudly. I am now, she said as she wiped her mouth. My vision slowly returned. In front of us stood a passageway, a large tunnel with loud thumping noises emanating from somewhere deep within. We're here, she waved, unenthusiastic. Hand around, indicating our surroundings. Abyssum, the pit of the world. Ah, hence the descent. It should have taken the name more literally. I should have taken the name more literally. I considered aloud, scratching my bearded chin. I pulled my goggles up onto my forehead. Without the sun beating down, they were ridiculously dark. She had begun to amble into the tunnel. I gathered myself and followed closely behind her. The hammering pulse ahead became clearer as we went. I think they were chanting something as though they repeated by a name. Pogo. The name grew louder. A crowd boomed loudly. Pogo, Pogo, Pogo. They did it in a quick rhythm of threes. Pogo, Pogo. Maddie looked at me and she backed up and gave me the lead. Unfortunately for her, I had no clue what to do either. We walked onward. Only one way to go, forward. I took each step with purpose. After 5 or so minutes and multiple turns, the temperature dropped at least 10 degrees. It felt as if we were going deeper in the earth. We finally came across the entryway ahead. Flies and vermin littered the floors, many scattered upon our approach. Beyond that, bodies lay strewn across the concrete floor, dead, rotting carcasses stacked on top of one another all around the room. The floor lay saturated in blood and bile. My eyes watered. The smell reminded me of my time I was locked away. I clasped my hand over my mouth to keep the taste that came with the smell at bay. Maddie made sick on the floor again. Poor girl would need to rehydrate soon. Couldn't imagine she had too many fluids left inside her. It wasn't like this before, she mentioned through the back shaking wretches. I nodded and stepped over the corpses. I had trouble with my footing as I slipped on the gore. The tunnel opened wide into the vaulted room. Once Maddie and I navigated our way into the 10 by 10 space, we heard a grating metal on metal sound. It was a trap. We walked for ages to get into a damn trap. Shit. The wall behind us slammed and the door above dropped into place. One of the corpses wasn't totally out of the way and splashed gore all over the room. It was the door turned into a pulp. Maddie shrieked and wriggled like she stepped through a spider web as body parts splashed onto her exposed legs. It missed me for the most part, but my boots were already covered in the remains anyways. I looked up and saw the single brass window with a dimpled piece of arclight in front of it. Arselic. It reminded me of the mask of one of those diving suits you would always see in the movies. Like, what is that? Jacques Cousteau would wear in his deep sea explorations. I assume they could see through it. Is that Jacques? Yeah, Jacques Cousteau. I think that's, yeah. I assumed they could see through it, but we were unable to see them. No idea, though. Truly odd. Not that the place stood as a picture of normality. Maddie pointed to a speaker on the wall, a circular metal disc with small black lines in it. This is where the source of the chanting resided. The loop played over and over. Moving closer, it sounded tiny without any source of bass. The repetitive cadence triggered a migraine. It's possible the tunnel had speakers in it also to amplify the sound. The small window opened and the speaker shut off. Instant relief for my throbbing head. Damn. So he's like going from one place to another that's like fucked up in every way, shape, or form. He can't seem to get out of the bullshit, so to speak. It's just constant. A silhouette of a thin man with wiry hair set behind the window. Simply seeing another human relieved my stress, even if he may have be some lunatic that trapped us in here. Truly impossible to tell anything else about him, though, with this window. Kadim, Maddie, he clicked his moist tongue. What do you offer for passage? Ugh. Maddie shrugged at me. As she grunted, a metal drawer sprung from the wall, and a loud whoosh. It clicked and rang out as it popped out. Maddie jumped back and eyeballed it suspiciously. I looked back at the still warm pile of bodies oozing on the floor and considered that I should go with something good here. Reached in my jacket pocket and placed the empty flare gun in the drawer. Maddie gawked at me with her wide emerald eyes and her eyebrows tilted in disapproval. Really? The fucking gun? Of all things to put in the damn drawer. She trailed off and rummaged through her purse. She then placed a Rhapsody soda into the metal drawer. The door snapped back with a click. We heard a slight giggle behind the window. Please, Rhapsody fizzed. Fizzy, enter. The wall itself separated and clicked open. The air warmed, became more breathable immediately. Light flooded the room, and we saw some semblance of innards of the underground abyssum. The walls yawned open fully to greet us with passage into the core of the city. Inhaling deeply, I closed my eyes to take the full essence of this place. My mouth salivated at the welcoming scent of fresh food. So you're getting food now, buddy. Huh, Kadim? Kadim? It's like Kadim. It sounds like very Arabic. But what do I know? Back to the book. The smell of other people was a sensation I enjoyed revisiting. Each scent, redolent of the time past. Redolent. Redolent? I feel like I want to say redolent, but it's not. Again, people, I told you. My words will not be perfect. I appreciate everybody not making a big thing right there. Anyways. Well, that was a pain in the ass, she groaned. I'm fucking hungry. After being locked away in a basement with the loving smell of feces, urine, and the coppery tang of blood to tease your senses. This was truly paradise. Hundreds of decisions echoed throughout. And I could hear people moving all around the walkways. The doorway snapped shut behind us. We moved forward through a hallway that gave us to a sprawling market. The caverns of Abyssum were immense. Terracotta-colored stone vaulted upward and out of sight, like having a beautiful view of a city at night. Sparkling lights flickered on and off at random for what could be miles. Hundreds of people shopped at a multitude of stores in the bustling marketplace. From the top of the hill where the hallway had ended, I saw a man selling grilled animal carcasses. Next to him, there stood a shack that had its rusted awnings pulled open, makeshift weapons laid out across the counter. In front of the large bar, filled to the brim with the melting pot of people, and in all this madness, there was, in all this madness, there it stood in all its glory, a clothing store. They had to have socks. I went to tell Maddie, but realized she had already headed over to the man peddling meats. I decided to venture over to the clothing store on my own. I walked past some large men who had some modifications done to their faces. I couldn't help but stare. I'd never seen the likes of this. One had a prominent metal jaw. The other had donned an arm made of wrought iron. Yeah. All of them were covered in dirt and sweat. I could almost see the odor pouring off them. I watched the man with the iron arm lift and crush a beer can with his hand. His group laughed together. The whole piercings movement had really taken it to a new level. That's good. I wonder if Hot Topics... Shit. That shit's good. That shit's good, Ryan. Fucking Hot Topics. It's all fully functional. Mm-hmm. And the sweet voice coming from the petite middle-aged lady wearing jade tea glasses beside me. She stood in ochre coverall with the sleeves rolled up. Been making them for years. I'm Patty. I'm sweet, talented, and expensive as hell, she chuckled. I saw as she tilted her head back in the laugh that she had a tattoo that said Patty on her neck. Her laugh brought back memories for me, something I felt I had lost. I pictured an old lady sitting in a rocking chair with an open door behind her. She slowly rocked back and forth while she sang an old Cat Stevens song. She had weathered, dark, piercing brown eyes, but the warmest smile you could imagine. My eyes welled as I reminisced about her. I must have visibly lost because Patty grabbed my arm. Dear, are you okay? She smiled. You made it in. You mustn't worry any longer about that damned pogo. He does all that nonsense for show anyway. All that pogo, pogo, pogo. She waved hand and dismissed it. You're new. She nodded and squinted through her glasses at me. I need socks, I explained to her, at a loss of what else to say. My feet are going to call off of my boots and stab me in my throat soon if I don't. I sat down and removed a boot and saw that my feet were red, swollen from their travels. They could have been worse, I guess, but they were still in pain. Patchwork is over there. It's the cheapest clothing store we have. She pointed to the shop I had originally headed to before I ran into her. She chuckled again. Well, if your feet fall off, I can replace them quick. She held up a handsaw that she produced from seemingly nowhere. I opened my eyes wide and in shock and shook my head. Thanks, I said to her. I'll be on my way. Enjoy your peace. I nodded to her and turned through the crowd streets. Walking barefoot and carrying my boots in hand, so much more comfortable. I thought about Patty for a second. She had a golden aura. I'd never seen a golden aura before. Typically, auras range in the muted colors. Metallic colors were something I was wholly unfamiliar with. I didn't get a bad feeling from her, though. So she must have been all right. My instincts were rarely wrong. I walked up to the store with a pulsing sigh that said patchwork in gleaming silver letters. A man wearing a backwards sweatshirt stood outside. It covered the bottom half of his face, but I noticed it went around his head entirely. The top of his head sat exposed. He wore slotted sunglasses that were large on his face, and he had a mohawk shaved close to his skull. His arms jangled as he spoke to the customers, waving his arms. Tiny bands that clinked and tinkled as he shifted. Minor blemishes of thievery and lying glittering his aura. His era. Sound like I'm from somewhere else than I should be, yeah? But aura. Something I would expect from a true businessman. He sauntered up to me, stood straight up, and put his hand across his chest and another to his chin. He lolled, hanging on to the for what seemed ages. I'm going to jump out of the ordinary here and say that you need socks. He opened his arms to illustrate his point. Man, 1 second. And we're back from that small little break. At least, I think I am. We'll see. So. Where were we? It covered the bottom half of his face, but I noticed it went around his head entirely. The top of his head sat exposed. He wore slotted sunglasses that were large on his face, and he had a mohawk shaved close to his skull. His arms jangled as he spoke to customers and waved his arms tiny. Oh, wait. Okay, so wait, here. Here we go. In a suit observation I mentioned, he scoffed as he tilted his chin downward in a nod. We have many socks. I even have a six-pack around here somewhere. He waved his hand as he leaned over to my ear and whispered, still in the package. Fresh. He opened his flattened palms and pulled them out latently. I liked socks, but didn't regard them in such high form of fashion as this guy might have. I'll take a single pair, I said, as his face fell into annoyance. He seemed disappointed I didn't want all of them. If he knew that my current hobby was stealing clothes from people I killed, he might have been thrilled to part with a simple pair of socks. He centered to the section of his kiosk and pointed out to the sock basket. They're available for 50 partials. Yeah, 50 partrails. Yeah, partrails. Partails. What is that? Partails. Partials or partals? Partials. Bleh. What is that? Yeah. 50 partials to trade. He noted partials, I asked him quizzingly. He cocked his eyebrow over his glasses. Money. He did the things with his hands again. The jingling rang out. As in cash, I pulled out a wallet that I had taken from Anthony in the shop. There were three pathetic, sweaty, and crinkled up dollar bills. They looked like you could catch a virus just by handling them. Oh my! He flailed his hands. Put that away. He smarted and patted my hands down. Do you think I have change for something like that here? I stood dumbfounded and utterly lost. Just take it. I pushed and balled up cash into his hands. You really don't mind? He twisted his head, inspecting me with one extremely suspicious eye. It's a lot of money. If it's that much, give me the pack of socks. Done. He chortled gaily and stuffed the cash into his pocket somewhere in his shirt. I stood silently while he handed me a bag of socks, a black trucker cap, to which I politely declined, and a carton of cigarettes, a pistol with a full clip, and a box of bullets. He placed it all neatly into a reusable bag that said Juicy on the side of it. He looked up at me and took his sunglasses off. He had tears in his eyes. You had made me so happy today. He had grabbed a metal pole with a hook on the end. Guess he was closing the shop for the day. He hooked the handle above us and turned to me before shutting it. If you ever need anything, you come see me. He spoke over his shoulder, his voice filled with compassion. Patchy will get you whatever you need. Thanks, I said with a raised eyebrow. I'm not sure how I got all this stuff, but he seemed to care greatly about the $3. Good for him. I was glad I could make somebody's day in this sideshow. I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned to see Maddie standing there with a large leg of meat in each hand. She extended one to me. It smelled gamey, like it had turned a day or so ago. Here, got you food. It's cheap enough down here. It cost me a penny for both, she said. I even got change. She held up a handful of iron coins. Upon inspection, they were about half the size of a dime, with a hole in the center. They're called partials, she smiled. Yeah, that's crazy. So it's only giving like partial of the money. I'm pretty sure that's like, so like he had to have basically given this guy like, in that sense, like of like our currency currently right now, probably like hundreds of thousands of dollars probably. So that Anthony guy, maybe like the money had to do with his great sin. You know, they break a penny into 100. The penny is the new dollar. Oh shit! Yeah, I was right. I was right before I even read it. Figured you may not know that because you've been sleeping or whatever. She shrugged as she tore a big bite into her meat. I turned and saw that my new friend Patchy had disappeared into the new closed storefront. That figured. I woke up and had a fortune, and I blew it all on a pack of socks. I decided to keep my mishap to myself. Yeah, I would keep your mishap to yourself. Fuck that. I ain't telling her that after you just said that she had a bunch of problems. As not to make Maddie vomit, roll her eyes, or chew her nails. Best to let her eat and be happy. Sans ticks. She handed me some partials and told me to grab us some beers. She sat at an open table and I dropped my bag of goods down next to her. There were lots of people there that had normal auras, but a few had truly grotesque auras, something I would like to handle. But in that place, it wasn't the safest venture to partake in for sure. This would have too many struggling people who were fighting for happiness and shouldn't be placed in a dangerous situation to make improper decisions that might involve them. The bartender stood tall with her purple hair in a ponytail. Her amber eyes gleamed when the light hit them. Her shapely lips matched the color of her hair. She grinned and asked what I wanted. A beer and a water. I leaned onto the bar. She smirked and raised her eyebrow. High roller, huh? She gave me a wink and pulled out two clean glasses. They were pint glasses with the Abyssum symbol etched into them. She placed them under the gear capped taps and pulled. A golden amber flowed from the beer tap, while the water tap featured an ice cube for its symbol. I watched her fill my glass with water. I had never seen a more beautiful thing after my trek. I noticed that there were no ice cubes placed in my glass. Ice? I tilted my head and grinned hopefully. It's cold, she said to me with the matter of fact look. Shit. That was good. That was good. 1 second, though. Okay. I had to check on my chitlins. Attentively, I should say. Let me make sure everything's all golden here. I looked around the bar and noticed a man hunched over the bar, hulking and morbid looking. A living tumor that had latched onto the bar itself, far larger than a normal man, probably close to 7 foot tall and wider than a Buick. His flesh was misshapen, probably from burns, and he modeled a few iron brads pierced into his face, possibly for intimidation. I doubted it existed to hold his face together, which struck me as funny because his intimidation never once came into question for me. I couldn't take my eyes off of him. This man stood out from all the others, as a lion stood out amongst kittens. His aura circulated jet black and saturated with sin. He wore an armored jacket complete with large iron shoulder domes and iron plates around his ribs. Hun? The bartender snapped me out of my stare. I wouldn't be doing that to him. She glanced with her eyes at the man I observed. You might have your eyes or the whole head for looking at him wrong. She smiled widely and said, 70 partials, please. I looked over at Maddie, who had already elbow deep in her food. I paid the girl what I said. Thank you very much. Enjoy your water and beer. She smiled and moved on to the next customer. I had not noticed the large man eyeballing me as I moved to the table. Here, I placed her beer down at the table and started to drink my water. Thanks, she said as she struck out a greasy hand. Ugh. Grabbed her beer and began to drink mid-chew. After a few seconds, she downed her beer, looked at me, her eyebrows furrowed into a scowl. I had really done something wrong. Really? You can't ask before you blow my cash on water? She pointed at the frosted glass accusingly. Didn't know it was expensive, I said, and I leaned back, shrugging. Most water is so horribly toxic from the devil's move back in the days that it's rare to find a clean spring anymore. Luckily, Abyssum happens to have the world's largest one. What did you pay for it? 50 partials? I nodded in former initiative. It sounds about right. But that's one hell of a price for water still. I shrugged again without any warning. Maddie leaned over and placed her elbows on the table and launched into a story. Not even a premiere. Bam! Story time. She loved doing this. You see, the devil and God hated each other. The devil hated humans almost as much as he hated God, she said, taking a bite of her meat and continuing her story, undoubtedly by the chunks of flesh in her mouth. Undaunted by the chunks of flesh in her mouth. He decided to kill us. He would release more of his infamous plagues. I mean, not only were they his original idea, he stole them from God. Not only were they his original idea, he stole them from God. Not that they were his original idea. Ah, God. Can't believe I'm messing up that so badly right there. Yeah, thank you guys for the follows. He decided to kill us. Not that they were his original idea. He stole them from God. But whatever. She paused and thought. Okay, so anyways, there was this war, right? God and the devil duked it out with Earth as their arena. She swallowed. Once this is one, this is cool because we learned that God indeed existed. Yet, unfortunate because this meant the devil did too. She motioned for a waitress to come over in between her story. Beer me, she tossed the waitress some partials on her tray. The waitress hustled off to the bar. I drank my water while I listened to her. Okay, so there were angels who fought for God and demons who fought for the devil. Simple. But those two aren't known for playing fair, right? So the devil began to kill off humans by poisoning our water supply. This would turn those dead people into hosts for demons. They would fall as parents, children, etc. Then they would arise as demons, mishappen things with fangs and claws and such. She made pointy mentions with her fingers in front of her mouth to simulate what teeth might look like, provided they were made of fingers. Some of them had wings, a great disadvantage to the angels. Seeing that humans are God's children, he didn't want this to happen to them, so he decided to turn the sun white. She paused for effect. Why would that matter? Fuck if we humans know. But demons would explode in pure white light, like fucking, she mentioned widely with her hands, made booming noise. Spittle flew from the mouth onto the spittle, I like that, flew from her mouth onto the table. Something biblical or such. Each passing day, the demons would die out. This angered the devil, so he decided to stop Earth's very rotation. As I tried keeping up with her endless barrage, the waitress returned with the beer for Maddie. She smiled at her and drank that down in just as fast as the previous one. I started to think that the use of oxygen just might be optimal for her. Okay, so here's the snag with stopping the Earth's rotation. First thing that happened, lots of humans died instantly, because when it stopped, it caused us to realize we were coasting with wicked momentum. You know how you ride in a car and you don't realize it because you're sitting in the car? Well, if you were driving a huge Earthmobile, she used her glass as a demonstration, and you crash into the mountain at, say, she paused and tapped her chin, 900 plus miles per hour. She smashed the glass on the table, and it shattered all over. I glanced around, but no one seemed to care. It fucking hurt, right? Probably just destroy the car, the people inside of it, and everyone else in the surrounding area. She plopped back into her seat and leaned forward again. So yeah, shit tons of people died in that instant. The people who were least affected by the phase lived at the North and South Pole, so Santa lived on just fine and fucking dandy, while the rest of us assholes who lived in the normal parts of the world were smashed into dust. Not everyone died, but a shit ton did. Luckily, all I got was some scrapes and bruises from it. I've always been resilient. Our car didn't make it through, though, and my dad broke his arm. Obviously, Anyone in the friendly skies flying or whatever didn't even notice. She stopped to wipe her mouth and put down half-eaten food. She looked over and noticed I didn't touch mine. Are you not hungry? She asked with the concern in her voice. I'm giving you my full attention. I don't want to chew and listen. They conflict with one another, I explained to her. She had a wide grin on her face. She could see some pepper stuck between her teeth. No, I could see some pepper stuck between her teeth, not her. Bleh. So you do have some ticks too, then. She smirked and made the question symbol with her hands. Quotation, not question. Back to my drink. I shook my head with a smirk and corrected her on this. A tick is a motor function, something involuntary, like rolling your eyes, clearing your throat, biting your nails, etc. What is called courtesy, an act of consideration at worst. It's a pet peeve to listen and chew for me. So you are incorrect. She rolled her eyes and tilted her head back dramatically. So anyways, look, back to my story. She continued, upturred by my counter banter. Counter banter. The earth wasn't totally round, right? The earth wasn't totally round, right? So when the devil stopped its rotation, the earth rounded out. Since we were spinning all at the same time, all the time, the earth itself used to bulge at the equator. Now it doesn't. Not a problem, right? She smiled with a glint of mischief in her eyes, then her face turned into a mask of anger. She slammed her hand on the table. Wrong! This caused the oceans to unsettle. They poured outward onto the north and south poles. So guess what? She threw her hands in the air with her eyes wide. Santa fucking drowned. It's bullshit. Just pisses me off to thinking about it. I guess that we're okay here in the middle now. But the other problem is, since we don't spin any longer, we no longer have seasons. So Santa wouldn't have a job anyhow. And she sat back in her seat. She summoned the waitress again. The girl already had a beer in her hand. Maddie paid her. She slammed down that beer. And well as dribbled down her chin into the fabric of her skirt. Maddie looked dazed for a moment. The alcohol finally seemed to be hitting her. So, as you can see, we're fucked, man. Only people who get some sort of normality are those rich assholes in Ouroboros, that magical city. She waved her hands dramatically. I took a sip of the water and stopped mid-swallow. Maddie gaped at something or someone behind me, her entire face draining of color. She squeaked out the words, "Ah, shit." I turned to see the living tumor in green standing behind me. He breathed heavily in my face, looked down at me, and said in a voice of grinding stones, "Nice jacket." I looked up at him, unperturbed by his size. "Thank you, it's new," I said, patting the labels. His solid black eyes reminded me of something. It is as she said, when you gaze into the abyss, it gazes into you. We made eye contact for a moment. Much to my surprise, he visibly shuddered. He shoved past the crowds, knocking others to the floor as he went. Maddie spit as she shouted at me, "That's fucking foul, man." She frantically grabbed her things from the table, including my leg of meat. Even terror couldn't deter her endless hunger. I turned to her. "He's the leader of that biker gang?" I pointed at him as he walked off. "He's a fucking living god, man," she said. I noticed she cursed a lot when plastered, possibly sober too. "We have got to go. I'm amazed he didn't kill you right then and there," she snapped. I sat back down, dusted my feet off, pulled on some fresh socks. They even had the wonderful elastic feel when they fit your feet just right. I must have been smiling because Maddie commented, "You look like an idiot. Get your fucking socks on and let's bolt. I don't want him coming back here realizing you killed one of his guys, stole his clothes. He'll try to kill us." She said, probably louder than she should have. The beer acted as an amplifier for her vocal cords. Aside from her shifting chairs, the bar fell silent. I already knew the scenario at hand. I strapped my boots, stood up. Without looking at who came from behind me, I grabbed my iron stool and spun full force in the oncoming adversary. He didn't expect it, and his jawbone exploded under the impact. The dude's head snapped backwards. He landed flat on his back, and I placed my weight on on my back foot and dropped my heel onto his oversized throat. Oh, how I loved the satisfying crack under my boot. No one would miss him. I turned to his fellow goons charging at me. I swung my stool at the one with the crooked schnoz. He reached up and pried it from my hands with his iron arm. Oh shit, it's the fucking, like the dudes with the fucking, like, weird prosthetics. The metal grated loudly as the stool became scrap in his hands. Steam hissed from his arm. I used my free hand to pull out the pistol in my bag. He reached the stool from... What is that? Wrenched the stool from my grip. I let it go and shot him 3 times in the chest. I could see a terrified, red-headed bartender through the holes in his chest. She screamed out. The dude fell backwards and collapsed onto the ground. Another favor done for the world. I found my footing when I spotted the other 2 guys stomping towards me with bats in their gigantic hands. I leveled the pistol and shot the larger in his knee. He toppled over and squealed in pain. The blonde closed in and cracked me with his aluminum bat across my left shoulder. Bam! He smacked me in my ribs and neck. I hunched over to fight the pain. He loomed over me, shot straight up and as fast as I could. I shot straight up as fast as I could and slammed my head into his jaw. He teetered backwards. My head ached horribly. It felt like I stood straight up into a steel grinder, whatever. Steel girder is what it said, though. So I was wrong. Both corrections. Warm blood spilled down my cheeks. His metal jaw had split my skull open. Clearly not the finest maneuver of the day. Blood thickened on my lips. I wiped my face with my forearm and leveled the pistol at him. I felt like I looked like a madman right now. The gun kicked as I fired it. The bullet blazed into the right arm. It fell limply to his side. Fell. He grabbed his shoulder and whimpered. His aura showed he didn't deserve to die. I left him and walked away to the larger man. I'd shot in the knee. His aura told a vastly different story. I stood over him, blood continuing to stream down my face, and I watched as he withered in pain. Damn, dude, this guy is like, gives 0 shits. This guy gives 0 shits. His aura had a russet brown tinge with a cerulean spot. Am I saying that right? He had killed a child, one of the worst things humans are capable of. Children are innocent. With many years before they comprehend the real decisions that impact themselves and others, the vision seeped into my head. He stood there yelling at a small boy with messy brown hair. He could not have been more than 6 years old. A broken window gaped behind the boy, and he picked up 3 pieces of glass. Runel's deep crimson blood trailed down his hands and arms to the ground. The carpet singed from the blood. The boy tried to stifle his sobs. The man's hands molded a fireplace poker. He smiled at the boy and raised the weapon above his head.
The strong, sharp, pungent taste of gunpowder brought my sense back to the present. Tears in my eyes, I ground my teeth, fighting for control of my emotions. My jaw ached as I turned my attention to him. That child you kill will never get a chance to grow up. It's unfair that you get to live and continue your horrible ways. Well, he never got a chance to make his own decisions, and you decided his fate over a broken window? A window? The gun buckled as I shot him in the other knee. He couldn't have been older than 6. A loud report rang out as I shot him in the stomach. He coughed up blood, and tears ran down his face. Worst of all, he was your own son. The gun issued forth one last tremor as I shot him in the throat. He lied there in a groaning pool of blood. Groaning? No. Growing pool of blood. Irish, you need to get your shit together. While everyone stared at me, I wiped the tears as they rolled down my face. Maddie stood horrified but calm. She had tears in her eyes as well. She placed a hand on my shoulder. Come on, Kedem. We have to go. We turned and fled into the streets of Abyssum. Alright. So, we are at the point where we take a break at this point. And that's part 1 of the book. Because I've read now a little over a quarter of the book. We're at chapter 4. I think it's actually at a quarter of the book. Let me see. Basically, we're at chapter 4, and I wanted to do, let me see, this will determine if we're going to continue on tonight or continue on another time. We're going to do one more chapter. Fuck it. We're doing one more chapter tonight, and then we'll do the rest, not the rest, but the next part of this book next week on Friday. So, let me take a sip of my drink. And we'll get back to this on chapter 4. But let's do a recap on this everything. So this guy basically is like, in my opinion, I think he's going to be an angel. And he doesn't remember who he is. The reason why I think this is because, he felt like he was being experimented on. Cut open, experimented on nonstop. Survived for so long without food and stuff like that. He could eat, but he survived. You know what I mean? Healed really well. Really well. And could see people's auras and even see the things that they did. So it's not just like he sees oh, you have a bad aura, you have a good aura. He sees your bad aura and sees the things you did to the T and why. And starts getting detail as it grows on. He's constantly growing detail on what the fuck happened and everything. So it's kind of crazy. God's not there no more. I don't know if he's dead or just abandon it. Basically, it's just fuck it. Devil's not fucking around no more. But are the demons still fucking around? That's the big question I got. Because it could be that angels are still kicking it. He saw the chick with the one aura. That could have been an angel. An aura he doesn't recognize, really. He's not seen that aura, really. That's he's I don't recognize that aura, but it's not a bad aura. That could be an angel, like him. Maybe he's again, I don't know if he's an angel. I think that he might be an angel. I think that that's what he is. I think that that's how he's seeing this stuff, why he feels like he's got the hand of God. He's got to take care of everything. He's got to kick ass. He's got to make sure that these evildoers are pay for what they've done or whatever in some sense of way. It's not just a cut and dry, like I said, bad aura, good aura. It's good aura, but you done some bad shit, but not too bad. Not bad enough that I gotta kill you. And he still defends himself too.
one moment. All right. Last chapter of the night. Let's get her done. Chapter 4. An ally emerges. We ran through Abyssum. My head ached. Blood and sweat disoriented my vision. And my adrenaline was the only thing that kept my legs churning. The once exciting smells of food, cloves, and alcohol replaced with the smell of our own acrid sweat and dust that kicked up as we ran, as our own crid, yeah, whatever. We sprinted through hordes of people. Everywhere we ran, people watched. They offered no help. They stood back and judged us from a distance. No one knew us. Why should they place their trust in us? Why should they protect us? Every shop closed their doors to us. We turned down an alleyway. There, the door stood agape, and we charged towards it. It slammed in our face moments before we were inside. Maddie screamed and hurled the leg of meat at the glass door. It splattered against the surface, leaving a mess. Fuck! She noted as she kicked the ground. We sought shelter from the impending problems that headed our way, yet none were available. Yeah, no shelters. We charged down another alleyway when we heard someone shout, "Hey, come in here, come in, come in." We looked over and saw Patty standing there, the friendly woman from the market I met earlier. She leaned outside of the garage with a beckoning hand. "Hurry, hurry!" Maddie turned to me with a questioning glance, and I nodded to let her know it was safe. We headed over to the open door. Patty stepped back and we crashed inside. Maddie fell over and lied on the floor panting. Her chest heaved up and down. I looked around and observed our sanctuary, a dirty garage with an old muscle car parked in one half, the other half reserved for Maddie's horrid breath. What is Maddie's horrid breath? What the fuck? "Thanks for the shelter, Patty," I said after catching my breath. Patty, Maddie, Patty. I motioned from one woman to the other and made introductions. I placed my hand on my knees and stood up. Patty nodded at me and smiled at Maddie. "You shouldn't have killed anyone here. That was a mistake for sure." She jabbed her finger at us like a mother scolding her child. "Glass is going to come for you." "Great, another problem." "Who is Glass?" I asked plainly. This is what I needed. Some new asshole to add to the plethora of problems I have already afforded myself in the past hour. "What is Glass?" would be the better question, she answered. "Glass," she paused, "is a cyborg. Biomechanical. Basically, he looks like a human, but he's mostly metal." I immediately pictured that robot cop from the movies. "Don't you make parts for things like that?" I asked her. She nodded at me. The conversation halted there when Maddie caught her breath. "Fuck!" Maddie heaved loudly, throwing her arms out. They slapped the ground loudly. "What the hell was that about, Kadem?" she said, heavily breathing, rubbing her hands over her sweat-soaked head. "They attacked us. I killed the ones that did deserve to live. The other ones got to survive. They were the punks acting on someone else's authority, no doubt. That foul character." They were shavs, correct? I asked her. She screwed up her face in annoyance. Yes, they were shavs, but killing shavs should not be in your hobby. She long finger pointed at me. It's dangerous shit, man. Patty agreed with her. Shavs are horrible people and only deserve the worst, Patty said, shaking her finger to Maddie. I'm only saying that it's dangerous to do so. They inflict only pain and use greed as motivation. That fowl is no better. Mm-hmm, she nodded. He's been coming around here trying to get me to install parts on his boys. She shook her head so they could withstand more punishment and do more damage. Says he'll pay me enough to make me rich. She spat a surprisingly large wad. Fell on the floor. Ugh. He could take his money and shove it up his behind for all I care. Patty don't work for no false god. She said, crossing her arms. She turned and began surveying her home. Now, you clearly are going to need a way out of here before a glass gets here. She stroked her long ponytail that hung over her shoulder. She looked over at the car and sighed heavily, obviously reluctantly about something. I followed her eyes to the beast that sat in the garage. I suppose I could loan her to you, she remarked to herself as she raised her eyebrow. I'd want her back in some time, though, so no roughing her up, she said after turning to look at me, her eyes stern and terrifying. Once again, Maddie broke the mood. A car? I could only dream. Maddie had somehow recovered quickly after the thought of having an automobile to ride in. Recovered. Not reward. Ugh. Thank you for the follows. We could go to the city now, Kadem. I don't know what she was talking about, as per usual. A car is well and good, but how would I go get it out of here? If I had to guess, we are far below the surface, I noted while thinking about the surroundings we ran through. Nope, Pat remarked and dismissed my ignorance with a wave of her hand. This here is a cave. The entrance you took, get in, was just on top of the side of a mountain. Where we are now just so happens to have a road out of here, built by yours truly. She placed her hands on her Osher coverall collar proudly. Get the fuck out, Maddie said. The front door thundered and quaked. Patty kept the door and crept to the door and peered through the people. She turned to look back at us. She had fear in her eyes. The door exploded up and Patty's head slammed violently into the wall as she slumped over in an unconscious heap. Luckily, she wasn't dead. The old woman seemed tough as nails. Oh ho ho ho, Fowl said in his grinding voice. Come to roost in the old hen's house, have ya? I watched as Fowl stepped through the shattered door into the garage. Fractured wooden pieces fell from the dismantled door and his boots crunched over them. A sound of slow dragging metal on concrete echoed around the room. He clutched a massive metal hammer that reminded me of the supersized meat tenderizer. His back cracked audibly multiple times as he arched his back and stretched to full height once inside. Fowl towered high above us. He had come alone, one of our only advantages so far. His figure took up a lot of space, an added bonus in his small shop. He'd have a hard time swinging that maul around, so you finally woke up, already killing off my boys too, huh? He said, pointing one knobby finger at my jacket. What do you mean that I had woken up? Did he know who I was? The constant is making big boy decisions that are upsetting the balance already. My balance, Fowl roared.
through Patty's entryway and back into her living room. Things were fine until you started killing off my boys. In a split second, he had closed the distance between us. He swung his maul overhead with ease. The concrete shattered into dust in front of me as the maul bludgeoned the crater into the floor. I jumped back while Maddie scrambled off behind Fowl into the rest of the house. I had no idea where she went. The giant paid no mind and instead hoisted his weapon up again. Why are you calling me Constant? What the hell is that? I hurriedly asked him while rolling to avoid a wide swing from the maul. I felt the air rush over over my back as the maul connected with the wall. He created a new bay window that overlooked the next room. In addition, I'm sure Patty didn't want. Don't play with me, boy, he said in vehemence, his breath like curdled milk. I know you came for me. This is my territory. The outlands are mine. Keep the big dogs out of it. The veins in his neck swelled as he swung again, this time tearing out the left side of the door frame. He didn't think this place would take much more of Fowl's wrecking ball. I didn't think this place would take much more of Fowl's living wrecking ball. It was time to move the fight elsewhere. You know what, Shav, you left alive? He asked while he turned and pulled the weapon into his grip. I killed him. What could I do with a wounded soldier? Useless. See this shit? You see this shit? He's useless. He's useless now. Okay, people? He's useless. He's no longer useful. That's what's happening. You practically did me a favor by letting him live. I felt great after I smashed his skull in. He cracked his neck with grinning, his teeth protruding at the angles. His aura was a living pool of ichor showing he was telling the truth. I rolled around to the front of the garage, back towards the entrance, and he ran further inside to gain some distance. I heard him talking to me, but I didn't turn to see if he followed. His thundering footfalls let me know. We stomped into the living room. The house smelled like a can of WD-40, tables covered in metal knickknacks, gears, tools strewn about the floor in no order. It occurred to me Patty was a bit of a grease monkey. I have run this territory for years, and I'm not going to let you mess with that, he snapped at me, curling his ham-sized fist in front of him. Look, I don't give a shit what you're doing here. I just want to get some socks and leave, I told him honestly. Not lie to me. His wretched breath overpowered the oily odor in the air. He struck his chin out perfectly for me. Finally, an opening. I leaned in and placed my fist right in the sweet spot. Felt like hitting a vault door. Damn, that would fucking suck. My fist rocked and my bones rattled down my feet. It must have looked like one of those old Tex Avery cartoons. My whole body vibrated back and forth. He staggered back a step or two, enough for me to tackle him back into the garage, where he tipped on the debris from the door. He landed on his back and slid supine. I realized Maddie had returned and stood right over him. Her left hand held a golden spray can, and her right hand a black one. Hey, Fowl, time for a makeover, asshole, she chanted at him. He opened his eyes in surprise and looked up to Maddie, and this time he made the wrong move. She aimed both cans at his face and pressed the nozzles. The cans erupted right in Fowl's face. Steams of black and gold mist intertwined. The paint rained down his lines. Ah! He screamed out. His hammer clanged loudly as it dropped, and he grabbed for his face. Gold and black runnels ran down his face and all over his hands. He looked like a glam kid from the 70s. Well played, Maddie. Let's go. I've got the keys, Maddie shouted, and ran back to the entryway and definitely scooped up Patty and carried her over to the car. The top was down, and I placed her in the back seat. Maddie climbed into the driver's seat. She took down and slapped the dashboard in dismay. What? I asked her, wondering what the holdup could be. Stick. I can't find the fucking driving stick. My first car in years, and it's a fucking stick. God damn it. She stomped her feet. Move, I'll drive it, I said. I used to drive a Volkswagen Bug back in the days. How old are you, man? Maddie asked while she reluctantly slid onto the passenger seat. I have no idea. These memories are all over the place, I told her honestly. Fal howled and rolled up to his feet, rubbing his face violently. He looked over at the sound, and I could see one of his black orbs stare at us with hatred. Having gained at least a little bit of vision, he charged at the car like a bull, head down, full speed. The car roared to life, and I took his moment's hesitation to barrel backwards through the garage door. People drove out of the way as we blasted through the gate. The garage door rolled off the side of the car and onto the dirt. I had no idea where I could drive to, and why the hell so many people were around. I didn't have time to think. I saw Fal charging wildly into the street after us, his golden black face twisted into rage. You could almost taste his fury. I made my decision as I tore off down the street ahead, clueless as if I have made the right choice in direction or not. The opposite direction from Fal had to be the right way, in my opinion. We left Fal in the dust as he stood covered in spray paint, screaming obscenities at us. I peeked into the review mirror. I watched him slam his maul into the ground. Dirt kicked up into his face, and he screamed out for revenge. Maddie pointed out into the passenger seat, her arms crossed over her chest. Are you serious? We just escaped death and you're pissed because you can't drive? Yes, it's a fucking 69 Roadrunner, man. I've only seen sim screens of this car. So much less as a chance to drive one, she exhaled loudly. Like a child. 68, dear, we heard Patty say from the back seat. You already dented up the car by rear-ending it, by the way, she groaned. I do appreciate the life-saving and all, though, Patty said, as she sat back up. She looked over at Maddie and hit her on the shoulder. Buckle up, you ninny. Are you trying to fly out of the car and become roadkill? Maddie looked at her wide-eyed and buckled up her seatbelt. How about those moves back there? I blinded Fal with spray paint. Pretty clever, huh? Found them in your office, if that's what you want to call it. It was a mess in there. I've got no lady to impress anymore. What does cleanliness matter? Her eyes watered and lost their focus. She turned her head toward the window. She seemed forlorn. Turn right up here, she said, pointing ahead at an opening. I turned where she had indicated. The road, nothing but gravel, truly horrible stuff to drive on. It kicked up an awful mess as we went. The tunnels were dark, but aside from the onslaught of gravel, not too bad. No one was trying to kill us, and no one accused us of being a constant. Whatever the hell that was. Not that it meant anything to me at all. Only a sliver of this world had made much sense so far. Last I could remember, David Bowie had just came out. Why did I know that name? Things were crazy. Being tied to a gurney and having your organs removed at least had some sort of an order to it. Stop here, Patty said to me. I slowed the car and stopped. The engine idled quietly. She got up and opened the car door. I noted the doors open in the opposite way of the normal car doors. Suicide doors. Upon reaching the rock wall, she felt along the stones. She then twisted her knuckles, and her pointer finger produced a light. I smirked. I'll be damned if the old woman wasn't full of surprises. She moved it around the wall for a moment and found her objective. There, she said enthusiastically, and tapped the wall, and the panel opened. She twisted some things and pushed an object out of my vision, and I went blind again as the light poured in. I would never get used to that sun. An immense gateway lifted upwards into the mountain, well hidden into plain sight. The sun shone so bright. Wiped my eyes watered again. I hated this sun. We drove out, and Patty walked through the shut of the door from the panel on the front of the wall. A crafty thing. No telling what else this woman had contributed to the world. Patty limped over to the driver's side. I could tell her injuries bothered her. "What is she doing?" Maddie asked, fiddling with her nails. "I don't think she's going with us," I told her. Patty walked up to me and placed her warm hand on my arm. It was a rough hand, calloused over many times. "You have been recognized as a constant. The pursuit will be strong for you. You need to remember to keep your own peace above all else and succeed where many else have failed," she said. "Don't be swayed by others." "What do you mean?" I asked her. "Just be you, that's all," she said. Without skipping a beat, she continued. This was one of those tactics mothers and fathers would use when they knew they had said too much, but didn't want you to ask any more questions. "There are some things about Pearl you should know." "Pearl, another cyborg?" Maddie asked, looking around for possible bad guys in the distance. She gestured to the car and rubbed her hand lovingly on the side. "No, she's the car," she said sternly to Maddie, who had clearly interrupted. "So, Pearl here is solar powered. You won't need gas in her, ever. Unless, of course, you go into the dark. Then you'll need gas. But she has a reserve tank that's full just in case. She's armor plated, and on top of that, she does come back. Oh, hold on. And the top does come back on. So she does have a nice radio that plays whatever songs you can remember. Just wave your hand in the front of the stereo to turn it on. It'll connect to whoever waves. It's a neurological connection. You might feel spacey at first, but it'll pass," she mentioned. "There is some knickknacks in the trunk for you, too. Other than that, just be safe. I'll expect my car back at some point. You should take full care of yourself now. Get away from Fowl and the others. They'll try to change you or flat out kill you. There is much more to you than you know," she said while smiling. "I'm glad you finally got out. Go find Solace. She's in Orubos. She'll be able to explain to you what a constant is. Good woman that Solace is. Always looking out for others." I looked at her, didn't know who she really or why she continued being so kind, but it was enough to move me. "I'll be back with your car. I must find myself." I hated to leave her behind. Maddie already waved her hand enthusiastically in front of the stereo. Some loud metal music came on. It jarred me out of my thoughts. "This is awesome!" Maddie shouted over the music. I turned back to say goodbye to thank Patty, but she had already vanished. Not sure how an old woman could move so fast, but I'd seen stranger things, I suppose. "What the hell is Ouroboros?" "Ouroboros," I asked Maddie. That's the end of chapter 4. So we're done with chapter 4. We're going on chapter 5. Recap before we end the stream for this small, not so small edition of the book reading that we had planned for a while. So, he was in the bottom of a restaurant. He says he got his organs taken out several times. No cuts or scars. Had to have been under for at least 20 years, at least. Last thing he remembers is David Bowie coming out. And then, yeah, man.
I still like. I think there's something to do with like angel, like maybe a descendant of God, or a descendant of an angel, or just something like vessel wise, maybe a vessel for an angel. Maybe an angel resides within his body, and that's what the experimenting was going on, was them trying to extract the angel from his body. Maybe that's why he could see the auras and stuff. You know what I mean? I don't know. I'm not going to read any more of this until we get to it next week on Friday. We'll get back on this. We'll read another 5 chapters, and we'll get this done within this month. We're going to be done with this book every Friday till it's done, at least. This will be on YouTube. This will be on Twitch, all saved under the videos. If you are watching this on YouTube, I'll have a link down below with where you could buy this book if you want to buy it ahead of time, or if you're watching this and you're wanting to buy it and read along. See where I'm messing up on my words. But again, man, thank you guys for coming by. Thank you guys for listening to me ramble and drink and read to y'all. We'll be back on reading next Friday, but of course we will back streaming tomorrow, as always. Thank you guys for coming by.